Sometimes it has been more saying to the friend, like, you're not yourself anymore. Like, you're not the old friend I used to know. Whatever this relationship you're in, it's something's not going right about
But
it.
like, I would go through all the ways that like, oh my God, my friend's going to hate me if I bring this up. But then why do I care about their approval if they're doing something that doesn't align with me?
It gets more sinister when people start approaching physically. It's almost kind of like, sometimes I wonder if it's because we're football players that people think, oh, they're strong enough, they can handle it themselves.
Oh, right.
There is a sense of like, how's this person going to react? Because we all bring our different trauma responses, how we feel in a stressful situation to these moments where you're like, what are you going to do?
Imagine that you're at a pub with a bunch of friends. You can see your mate on the other side of the table sidling up to one of the girls, and she's clearly not into it. Then you can see his hand move to her thigh. The voice in your head is saying, she really doesn't look into it, should I say something? But you might also be thinking, well, I look like a dick. Or is it patronising to stand in for her? Or what if my mate arcs up at me? Now picture the same situation. Someone making unwanted advances on someone else, at work, on the train, or between two people you don't know at the pub. There's heaps to consider before stepping in as a bystander to ensure everyone gets out of the situation safely. But whether it's calling out a bad joke, helping out a friend who's been pushed into something they're not comfortable with, or telling someone to back off when they're being a dickhead, your small move could make a huge difference. Today, we're unpacking how to speak up without feeling like you'll lose your friends or end up in a fight. Plus, we'll talk about how to support someone who has been harmed after the fact, because sometimes you can't actually intervene in the moment, but you can still be there afterwards. I'm Anthony Stefanos from Teach Us Consent, and I'm here to learn with you all. And joining me on the couch is Daniel Principe, a youth advocate who champions young people every day in schools around the country. Tom Forrest, a journalist and proud Yorta Yorta man who cares about honest conversations. And Lucy McEvoy, co-captain of the AFLW Swans and passionate about being part of the solution. Welcome everyone. It's great to have you here and keen to get into this chat.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, great to be here.
The intent behind these podcasts is to really work out the stuff together and get into the nitty-gritty of these complex conversations, which, as we all know, can be a little bit scary and awkward. So in the spirit of no wrong questions or answers here on the couch, I'd like to start by asking each of you one thing that you'd like to know about bystander action that you might be too afraid to ask or you think might be a quote-unquote silly question. We might start with you, Lucy.
Yeah, of course. It's obviously a topic that I don't know if it's given much thought with many people, but when it comes to my mind, the initial question I have as a bystander, if you witness something, is it okay for you to give consent if you feel like the person is not in a position to be able to do so themselves? Because obviously if there's alcohol involved, they're maybe not in the right state of mind to be able to do so.
Absolutely, great question. And Tom, how about yourself? Do you have any?
Yeah, I guess I was curious about when it comes to hopping in essentially or intervening is when is the right time? At what point should you jump in and how do you sort of weigh that up essentially?
I feel like if I were to have one personally, it would be is when a friend makes a bad joke or a joke in bad taste or a sexist joke, is my silence, so not laughing, not giving the reaction, is that enough? But curious to ask you, Dan, as you work in the space a lot, do you find that you get sort of frequently asked silly questions, quote unquote, again, or is it not, you don't get too many in this field?
Not so much. I mean, these are all very earnest, important questions that we need to wrestle with. I feel the same. Like, when do you jump in? Is silence enough? You know, what do you do when you see a friend who may, in other situations, be okay with what's happening, but now they're having a bit to drink? So I think they're all very reasonable questions. I wrestle with them all the time in my own context. Like, when do I speak up? When do I pretend like I haven't heard someone mutter something under their breath and actually do something? How do we make sure it doesn't escalate and kick on?
I think talking through the bystander situations like you've touched on, Dan, is going to be a big part of this chat. So do we want to start by sort of chatting about our experiences, perhaps a time that we stepped in as a bystander? How did it make us feel? What happened? Did any examples come to mind for anyone?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick us off. Obviously, I've, being a female, I've probably found myself in that situation a little bit more often. And there's certainly a nervousness that comes with stepping in, particularly if it's with friends or you're out with, you know, some girlfriends out at a pub or whatever, wherever it may be, even in public, on public transport, for example. And there's always a bit of a, do I intervene or do I not particularly if maybe it is a male on the other end of it that is showing actions that may be of harm to me as well as the person that's being affected. But it's ultimately, I've always felt like if it's handled within the right way and as calmly as possible, it's had an okay outcome for the people involved.
Well done for stepping in. Tom or Dan, have either of you ever had situations where you've had to intervene?
Yeah, I mean, even only the other night, actually, I was out and about socialising in the city with a large group of friends, and a young girl came up to me and was pretending she knew me, and I didn't know if I met her or not, and then sort of within a few seconds I realised, and she'd kind of mentioned, oh, sorry, we're getting harassed by a guy behind me. Can I stay here for a second? And so I said, oh, of course, absolutely. I didn't make a big deal of it. Pretended, we were good old friends, just spinning a yarn. And I let a couple of my friends know when they come over, oh, there's someone sort of harassing these two young girls. And eventually there was no more intervention needed. And I think the person harassing them realised that, these girls have a lot of friends here. And when I approached her afterwards to see if everything was okay, the gentleman had already left. So even that just sort of naturally being able to have a yarn and step in there in a really sort of indirect way. And it felt good that I was surrounded with some friends who were also able to make them feel safe as well. Yeah,
so did you, was there any part about you that felt maybe unsafe while you were talking to her, conscious that there was someone perhaps off to the side that, for lack of a better phrase, was trying to get at her?
I think it's something, even growing up in a regional town, I'm very aware of, potential risks of stepping in. You're out and about, but maybe it's late at night, maybe there's people who are drinking, it's a bit more, intimidation potentially. I didn't at the time. I had a good group of friends with me. I didn't feel threatened by the gentleman that was, harassing these young girls. But it's definitely something I was made aware of. You don't know what this person, how they might react if you step in directly. So it's definitely something I was extremely conscious of, and sort of not making light of it in any way, but just sort of glancing over and having a look. What does this person look like? Do they look like they're potentially dangerous, or could there be a risk involved? And luckily there was no more further action needed. It was just about being able to, essentially pretend we're good friends for a few moments there, and let that person know that this girl has a lot of friends here, essentially.
How about you, Dan? Have you ever had a situation where you've intervened?
Yeah, I have. I feel like I want to start though with the honest truth, which is like, there are so many regrets I have in life, and this isn't to overstate that, but I reckon most of them are where I have missed a moment to stand up for somebody. And I think back to my high schooling experience, and I was a very soft, sensitive kid getting bullied a lot. And I remember other people who were being humiliated on the school bus, seeing things happening, where people were being hurt, just bullied, ridiculed, humiliated. And I think I cared a bit, but I definitely didn't know how or have the courage to say something. And I carry that with me. And I guess part of my work is in response to that. So I just want to acknowledge that, and also say I'm a recovering people pleaser. So this isn't something that I just get out of bed and I feel like, ready to tackle every day. Like, there is a sense of how's this person going to react? Because we all bring our different trauma responses, how we feel in a stressful situation to these moments where you're like, what are you going to do? And I'm a fawner. I've learnt that. I'm going to fawn in that situation and try and make friends with this person to try and de-escalate it. And so that's really helpful to be mindful of that and aware of it. And so, I'm grateful that over time, we get to get a bit more grounded in ourselves, feel a bit more confident, learn some things, and intervene. And I think of two scenarios probably in the last few years. One of them was, I was out in the valley with my best friend in Brisbane, and if anyone knows what the valley's like, it can be wild. We were out for a wholesome evening. We were just eating lots of complex carbohydrates and having a walk afterwards. And these guys ran up to this, like one of those wine and paint nights. And there was a lot of women who were out doing that in this place, and these guys were just swelling around the front of this, just yelling out, making lewd comments like paint this, painting particular genitals or body parts, and, making these inappropriate comments. And I heard it. There's no way I couldn't. I just remember walking past, didn't even break stride. And I just said, not tonight, lads. Just something just like really simple like that, and just like kept walking. And they just stopped, all turned, looked at me, and we'd already kept going. And it just, that in and of itself had just de-escalated it. And yeah, there was nothing more to it than that. I think one of the ones that became a little bit more tricky is I was walking here in Sydney in Surrey Hills, and I saw a man like running towards a woman on the street. They clearly knew each other. She was trying to get away, and he had grabbed her by the shoulders and was like shaking her in kind of middle of the street. And I didn't intervene in the sense of I didn't run over there. I just got my phone out and started filming. And I said to them, like, I'm going to call the police unless this de-escalates. And that was it. Yeah. And like I just held my phone and was just recording it. And then eventually he let her go. And then she went, and I just gave her a look like, are you okay? Like, do you need me to do anything? And she kind of just went in the other direction. I sit here going, should I have done more? I don't know. But those are probably, two of the scenarios where it didn't thankfully require more. I recognize not every scenario maybe was as simple as that or not as intense as that in terms of having to intervene though.
Sounds like there's a lot of strategies there, which we'll get to later on. And I'm glad, by the way, that you mentioned about the people pleasing and fawning, because I personally relate to that. And I feel like might be a lot of guys who might not intervene, not because they're happy to let the thing unfold, but out of people pleasing or perhaps not wanting to get into a fight. So just to kind of touch on when didn't we intervene, and perhaps even Lucy, for you, have you ever been in a situation where you wished maybe someone was coming over to intervene and they didn't, but you didn't know how to potentially go up to them the same way that person went up to you, Tom?
Yeah, there's not personally for myself, but I've definitely witnessed friends who maybe it would have been the appropriate thing to do was to intervene. But as I said before, you kind of question your own safety in that sense. Being in situations where there's, large groups of men around and you're just a little bit unsure as to whether if I step in, am I going to be harmed in this situation as well? And that's always the initial thought that comes to mind. And then it's going, okay, well, if I am not strong enough in how I intervene, will it continue? And then if I'm too strong, am I just going to make the situation worse? So, yeah, there's certainly been, multiple occasions, like you said, Dan, where intervention would have probably helped the situation, but it's always the doubts and the questions that come with it.
Have you ever had a situation, Tom, instead of them coming over to you, you've witnessed it now? And then, because I think, kind of ashamed to say that it'd be 50-50 whether I can work out a way to intervene or not. And I think, maybe that comes down to a courage thing or a people-pleasing thing, but how have you responded?
I've had lots of situations where it's very similar, right? Where, I might see someone getting harassed in the street, or whether that's in the city, out and about on a social evening out, whether it's in the regions during the daytime. And it's not always as simple as going up, hey, you okay? Or, hey, mate, back off. Maybe there's 5 big fellas and you're by yourself, and that's happened plenty of times in Sydney, walking down the road, headphones on, sort of notice something, and I'm thinking to myself, it could be 7 a.m, could be 5 p.m, I'm by myself, and I'm quite a tall person and a confident person, but I haven't gone over, and or maybe directly I haven't gone over. Sometimes I've sort of loitered around at the back on my phone, and then maybe the blokes have taken off, or the person being harassed has eventually been left alone. And I guess that's, regarding my own safety, it's not always as simple as just going over there. Sometimes you definitely do have to take into account what risks you might be facing, and that's when potentially there's that next step of calling the police. Or if it is at a social evening out, can you speak to a security guard, someone who's in a better position to help in case things do escalate? So it can be a really scary moment, especially if you are witnessing something more very, very serious like DV. Getting involved can be a really scary thing.
Just to go back to you, Lucy, because as your co-captain of the Sydney Swans and the AFL, what kind of stuff do you see that needs calling out in sort of the sports realm, and is it comfortable to do so?
I think it's definitely at a stage where it's more common for people to speak out against comments that may not be appropriate. I think we're getting a lot better as society, in society as general, that if people are saying something, we all know it's inappropriate. More and more people are stepping in and being like, hey, that's not okay. In terms of a sporting space, it's definitely around more so the gender equality in sport and that side of it. But also just in general, how women athletes are treated. If they happen to be recognised when they go out, it can maybe attract some comments that aren't pleasant. But as I said, people are very quick these days to, if something is said, pull it up. But if it gets more sinister where people start, approaching physically, it's almost kind of like people are hesitant in that sense. Sometimes I wonder if it's because we're football players that people think, oh, they're strong enough, they can handle it themselves.
Oh, right.
And there's been a couple of instances like that, but I'm lucky enough that I've never been in a situation where it has turned to that, and very thankful that as a society we are more comfortable in knocking it on the head when something is said.
Yeah, great. Beyond safety, Dan, why do you think people hesitate to step in and get involved?
I definitely think we need techniques. Something I worry about though is the lack of care, because you're not going to show courage to step in if you don't care. If this other person, and it's not whether it's that's my girlfriend, that's my boyfriend, that's my friend, it's just a person. If we don't actually care enough to do something, and it doesn't have to require us putting ourselves in the front line, but calling security, calling whoever's in authority at that place, I think that's what worries me. I think there is a desensitization, and Lucy, I don't know what it's like to be a professional athlete, but I am observing the fact that you see people having a more calloused regard, what's being said on socials, and I wonder if that is actually translating. And so my question is, do we care, and are we becoming a little bit desensitized when it's so easy to fire off behind an avatar troll account online some comments towards another person? I'm seeing some people better equipped to challenge it, but then I also see other pockets where I'm is it just entertainment? And one of the things I know for young people is it's people get jumped in fights, guys, girls, just young people, and then people start filming. It becomes entertainment. It does the rounds on Snapchat. People aren't intervening. They're not de-escalating. It's this is now entertainment for clicks.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the whole world to scroll at your fingertips every night before bed on whatever platform you use. And then what do you think when people go out and see something? It's I'm just getting a live version of the thing now, and just let it unfold.
There's an element to that. Yeah, when you see other people, and the young people tell me, people just getting their phones out, and it's re-traumatizing them, because not only did it happen to them in real life, they're now having people share this around in their communities. And so I definitely say we are improving in this place, but I think tech adds an extra layer of complexity.
You raised a pretty good point, Dan, that I just want to touch on quickly about the care factor, bringing back that empathy. I think also if someone is being harassed or there is an incident going on, I do not think it's uncommon for members of the public or anyone, for that matter, to, in a way, sort of discriminate. Do I jump in on this? I come from a really remote community. I see it all the time. Very blatant discrimination or very blatant racism, and for that matter, maybe it's someone from a different cultural background, for example. Maybe it's someone who's living quite rough, who's having an incident, and maybe people are less inclined to step in for that matter. Oh, we don't know their background, etc. But I guess, as opposed to jumping in for, say, an office worker or someone who looks similar to your age, something about bringing back that empathetic feeling in the community of it doesn't matter what social situation they're in or what background they're from, it's still important to intervene regardless.
I think that's such a great point as well, because the way you intervene will kind of shift, I reckon, depending on whether it's a stranger, a friend, or how you perceive them, whether it's their race or something else. So I think that brings us to our next topic pretty nicely, about the challenges of intervention, and it can be quite hard when confronting a friend. So I think we start there. Why do we think people struggle with confronting friends perhaps the most?
I think in general people just don't like confrontation. Naturally, I think a lot of humans just want to avoid it and mind their own business, not realising the effect that it has if you don't confront them about it. And you are continuing to feed the narrative of allowing it to happen. So I think just in general, people don't want to have that. It's a hard conversation. Yeah. Of course, and you don't want to upset your friend or your partner or whoever you may have that conversation with. I don't want to tread on their toes and make something out of nothing if that's how they see it.
That's such a good point. It's a feeling that everyone's familiar with
Yeah,
that,
absolutely.
Right? You just don't want to have to, even though they're your close friend, don't want to have to confront them. Have any of you had an experience where you have, gone, all right, I don't want to confront them, but I will, and done it? And how's the relationship been before and after?
I enjoy having honest conversations, but not all my friends do. And I think, as you said, like it's hard enough to confront a stranger, like someone you might have zero care for. If someone is, if you are essentially having a crack at the perpetrator, like trying to stop or intervene, that's hard enough. And then I think it is a lot harder with friends who, you're close with. You don't want to ruin the relationship. Maybe it's easier to let it slide. It could be something quite small on the scale. It could be something quite big. It can be a lot harder to have those conversations. I've sort of had yarns to close friends who are in relationships where they're displaying quite coercive behavior and potentially projecting their own thoughts and feelings onto the relationship. Things like, I don't know, having locations turned on for their partner, but it's not quite in the safety aspect way, or sort of controlling about what they wear and where they are and what they're doing, having a lot of distrust, and therefore becoming quite controlling in what they do. So whenever I have tried to intervene in that matter, it has been in quite a sort of, I'm not confronting them. I'm not trying to have a crack at them. I'm not trying to make things kick off. It's more about like how my friend is potentially projecting their own problems onto their partner, and that, it's still important that you are both independent people. And sometimes it has been more saying to the friend, like, you're not yourself anymore. Like you're not the old friend I used to know. Like whatever this relationship you're in, something's not going right about it, and like the behaviors aren't well. But yeah, I think it's probably about, in those moments, not being too confrontation, also just bringing it to light. Like, is what you're doing, does it seem right? And those behaviors can be learned through their parents, through their friends, etc. So they're hard conversations to have, and I think they can be done right though.
As a people pleaser, it's very inspiring to hear someone who might not have like the same inner voice in the lead up. I don't know if you, as a recovering people pleaser, but like I would go through all the ways that, like, oh my God, my friend's going to hate me if I bring this up, but then why do I care about their approval if they're doing something that doesn't align with me? Is it a weird thread to follow maybe, Tom, but could you give us an insight into what your inner voice does before, in the lead up to speaking to that friend?
And just quickly too, like, it's not this like black and white scenario, right? It's not, I don't think life works at, well, that person doesn't align with my values, catch you later.
Yeah.
Like often our brothers, our sisters, our good friends, our family might not have the same values and opinions as well. I just don't think anyone's that blunt where they can cut someone off because of that at the end of the day. Like, people get along by not sharing the same opinions as well. It's, it's just a part of life in our workplace, etc. I guess when I see a friend, and maybe, it could be both. Maybe they're in a coercive relationship. Like maybe they're being the bad person, or maybe they're the victim in the situation. And I have a good relationship with a lot of my friends. We speak quite often, all the time. I'm very open. I try and then lend that to them as well, to feeling comfortable to share as well. I don't know. I think I've just seen these constant cycles growing up. I've seen the really toxic relationships. I've seen the toxic behavior, and just seeing that constant cycle. So I don't know. I just think for me, like, it's better for both people in the end. Maybe it's telling a friend, like, bringing it to light that, people can see this, or I can see this. I've noticed this. Like, it's not a good thing. Do you think this is right? Do you think this is a very nice thing? And I want my friends to be better as well.
God, that's such a beautiful mindset and a great example to set as well. Thank you. Well, Dan, do you think that guys in general, men in general, find this more difficult to intervene with a mate? If you think of like groups of boys at school, it's kind of hard to swim against the current.
Yeah, the pack is hard.
Yeah.
You don't want to see yourself as outside of the pack, or that guy that's disrupting this kind of little social cohesion that we've got going on here. And so, yeah, it is hard. I mean, that is the biggest difficulty for young men, is to like find their own identity and voice outside of the peer pressure and conditioning and social norms that, are formed broadly, but then within their own group dynamic. I just want to say, Tom, I love how you talked about empathy and like checking in on that mate who would say, hey, you don't seem to be like as thriving as you were. I was like, is everything okay? Because it's true. Like those attitudes aren't just coming out of nowhere. And usually that person is feeling insecure. That's why they're becoming more controlling and aggressive. So I think it's really cool to be able to invite it from a place of like just a general check-in. Like, is everything going okay, mate? Like, and then seeing how that conversation unfolds. But yeah, I think it's tough for all of us. I just want to flip it. Like I've been confronted. I remember a long time ago, I made a very derogatory statement to a friend and a female friend overheard it. And she just said in that moment, like, Dan, not okay. That's all she said, right? And I sat with it. Did I feel bad for a moment? You betcha. Did I feel bad when I went to bed that night and thought about it and like sat there like ticking over my head? Absolutely. But I just want to normalize the fact that like I'm so glad she did that and she actually challenged me. And you can go read all the books in the world, but I think it's actually how you go and respond to those moments when you are personally challenged. And she was right. They're the stories that we come with us because we all have teachable moments where we get to decide how we respond when it's like, yeah, I didn't live my values then, or like I'd never thought about that, or is that actually how I want to be speaking to my mates or people in general? And like, it was such a good reality check for me. Again, like I don't think about it on the daily, but it was like just something that buffeted me along in the journey to think about how do I want to speak to other people? And I think we need to have a disposition that like, I don't know, I just make the assumption like, surely we all want to be good friends, lovers, humans, like, right? So that might mean we might have some things to learn along the journey of how to do that well.
Do you find it hard for women, Lucy, to intervene, whether it's, calling out a female friend or the examples here, like calling out a male friend?
To be honest, I actually, and I'm not sure if it's the correct way to approach it, but I've always found it easier to, particularly like, because a lot of the comments come through in a joke sense. Like it's just like a playful kind of jab and then you over here and you go, oh, yeah, that's probably not it. I've approached it in some situations where I've kind of joked back and been a little bit lighthearted and be like, hey, like, what's the go here? Like, but then in another sense, there's always been instances where something's been said and it's a little bit more, or it's cut me a little bit more deep and it wasn't even directed at me. And I've turned around and said, what if that was said to me? How would you feel if that was said to me? If I'm your sister, you're a female friend or whatever it is, how would you feel if that was said that to me? And they've always gone, oh, actually, maybe you're right. Even though you may think it's funny, it's not. And we're in a day and age where that's not okay anymore. So
I know this is sort of a really general question, and I apologise just sort of using male, female binaries and language. So feel free to jump in and correct if you're comfortable. But do you think women are wanting men to intervene more on their behalf, or is that a patronising thing to do?
It's probably more personal for each person, I find. I'm more than okay with people stepping in. I have no issue. Sometimes that I'm actually given to me a sigh of relief that, oh, thank God I don't have to have that or be the one to do it. That's just my personal experience with it though. And I've always just gone that it's because they care, which is a great thing. As you said, like, I'm like, they care. You want to say something? I actually feel really comfortable with you saying something. I think it's understanding who you may be speaking up for. If you know them well enough that they may turn around and say, I don't need you to speak on behalf of me, then it's just like, hey, I know you're strong enough to do it yourself, but I just want to help.
Would it be more helpful to do sort of approach the person who's being potentially harassed and say, hey, would you like me to say something for you?
And more often than not, sometimes we don't know how to ask for that help. So having someone come up and ask us, do you need my assistance? Do you need me to step in? And more often than not, it's a relief. And sometimes the person themselves may not even know that they're in that kind of situation. So just having someone be observant for them and realise that this may not be going the direction that we like. Again, I've always found that helpful.
In situations where you've intervened in the past, Tom, and we might have already touched on it, but are there a few things that go through your head to assess your safety and the person's safety? I think you said before, it's 5 big blokes. Maybe we just film this one.
Maybe get the Sekis onto this one, boys. Of course. Like even Lewis, what you were saying before, it's sort of like I just wanted to raise something quickly. Like maybe when intervening too, it's not about jumping in there and saying, hey, mate, leave this person alone. Maybe it's asking the person, hey, you're all good. And they can tell you.
Yeah.
Actually, no, I'm not. This guy's harassing me,
Yeah.
Or, no, I'm feeling really unsafe. Or So I think that's a really great approach. Of course, it really isn't easy. I think you've got to think about where people are all across the country, like different social norms in different towns and different cities and different suburbs, etc. You're not always going to be the hero and run in, especially if it is potentially there's danger involved. That's when I think there's probably those good options, right? Like if you can't directly help, do you have some friends that can come over and help with you? Can you get the security guards?
Tom, you're a host's dream. What a segue into effective intervention strategies, everyone. There are a lot of different ways someone might be able to intervene, and people talk about the 5 Ds, Dan. Are you able to explain that to us, or if you even have an alternative to that potentially?
Sure. When I'm speaking in schools to young people, just try and keep it as simple as possible and talk to the fact that like you could be at an event or party, and as you said, like you could go over and ask directly, like it's that direct question. Is everything okay? Are you all good? You could create a distraction. Like you could be like, hey, do you guys want to go play a game, or the pizza's here, or like read the room. It depends on the context. Like, so you could create a distraction or say, hey, let's go do something else. Like whatever that may be. Should we go to a different venue? You know, like something like that. Rallying others is like another option, you know, like if you can get people to come with you and that you can actually have that kind of moral support, help keep you safe, both emotionally, mentally, physically, whatever you need. And I think obviously there's the appeal to authority, like go and get someone, as you've rightly noted. I think the other one that I think we sometimes just overlook, and I was listening to like a professor recently talk about the research on this, which is that like that actual like extend support check-in, like obviously we'd all love to make sure we had the minerals to say and do something in the moment, you know, to make sure that that person was safe, irrespective of who they are. Because I think like back to your point earlier, Luce, about like whether it was like guys intervening for girls, I think the question is like, would you intervene no matter who it is? Not just, you know, if it's a woman, do you actually just care, period, no matter who that person is? It's probably a good heart check. But if you're in that moment and you maybe haven't had that response, I think the final and most important one that this research shows us is like that check-in, that extend support, whether it's in person, tapping them on the shoulder afterwards, or just texting them afterwards, reaching out to them like, hey, are you okay? I saw what happened. Like, I'm really sorry about that. Are you all good? The research shows that that can really limit the kind of impact of poor mental and well-being outcomes because of what's happened. Just that someone saw and someone cared enough to reach out. And so I think like bare minimum for all of us, like, would you at least just check in on that person? And then hopefully get more tools under our belt, maybe rally others or appeal to authority. We can do something about that.
Can I ask a question on that? Have you ever had a situation where you've reached out, follow up and said, hey, I saw what happened, are you okay? And then they've flipped and said, why didn't you do anything?
I personally haven't, and they could. And like, if they genuinely felt that, like that's also a great teachable moment where it's like, yeah, and you can actually say like, I didn't know what to say. I'm actually really sorry. What would you have needed from me? Yeah.
Use it as a learning curve.
Totally. Almost, if everybody's just not as defensive, like, because if your desire is like, I hope you're all good, then like, and if I actually give a rip about you, then it's like, I'm actually going to be open to hearing that, you know?
Yeah.
And if there's a future situation to make sure you're all good or someone else is, like, I want to hear that, like, and think through that. So again, if our heart's in the right place, which is, I actually just didn't know, I felt overwhelmed, like, and so you're like, please let me know. I really want to like be able to feel, you know, more equipped in future. Then you're hearing that and you're not going to get offended by that because the care factor outweighs like your bruised ego. That's how I would see that.
Yeah, I think that kind of comes back again to that sort of victim first approach. How are they feeling? What can you do to make them feel better? We can all sometimes imagine that intervening is sort of like, oh my God, I'm going to break up a fight or I'm going to get myself hit. So if I kind of pose a couple of scenarios, can we try and work through them?
Let's do this team. We may not have all the answers, but we'll do our best.
So, all right, first one. We're at a club, you're at a club and your mate is dancing with a girl and she looks really not keen. What do you do? Now that could take a few different forms, whether, you know, they're being a bit more physical with them and their body language is showing the opposite, or they're just, I don't know, even if you're just sort of talking them into a corner and they keep moving away, that's, I guess, number one, what are the signs actually to pick up that, oh, she's not keen? And then number two, what do we do?
I think sometimes these things happen, right? Like your mate, even yourself, you might be chatting to someone, you might think that maybe you're being flirtatious, the other person is into it, maybe you give it a few beats, maybe the beats are too long, you know, trying to establish that. So maybe a friend is doing this, is dancing at a club, and the person looks quite uncomfortable. I think one of the first approaches, maybe you don't have to go straight up to this person. Hey, are you okay? Maybe it's as simple as grabbing your friend. Hey, brother, let's go get a drink.
Yeah.
Hey, mate, hey, bro, let's go to the back area. And if they don't want to, it's just that persisting. You're good friends with them. You can put your arm around them. Bro, let's go. We're getting a drink. Come with me.
Yeah,
and they're
nice.
going to come with you.
Yeah.
And then if they do say they want to head back out and dance with that girl, that's when you can intervene. Oh, brother, they actually weren't that interested in you, bro. I'm so sorry, man. They weren't feeling it, brother. And then that can be that. It can be as simple as something so small like that, as grabbing your mate. Hey, bro, let's go get another drink somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Because you're right, it's simplified it a lot. Because you do that 100 times in a night. Grab a friend for a drink or whatever it may be.
Absolutely.
And then away you go. You might be out of a situation, and then you can handle it away. Because do you think people would be less emotional when they're slightly removed?
I agree. I think I'd probably fire a text first and say, hey, brother, like, come get a drink, or like do it sort of more subtly, and maybe even then if they're like responding to you, could say, hey, like, I don't know if they're vibing it.
I think it does go back to what you were saying before, though, about you can make it really small, as something as light as saying, that's not funny. That wasn't it, brother. That wasn't it. You don't have to go over there, embarrass your friend in front of the person you're trying to flirt with, It can be as simple as saying, bro, let's go get a drink. Hey, let's go get a drink.
That's
and the
right.
same can go as if someone you know or if someone you don't know makes an inappropriate comment. You can just say not funny and move on, and they will take that to bed later on, probably thinking about it. Oh, that's embarrassing. That's shame job. I did that, So that's probably the way I see it.
The voice of reason, Tom. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Okay, scenario 2. If we're happy to move on, if anyone else had comments on that one. Okay. You can see 2 people you don't know at a party. One of them's kind of sober. The other one looks very drunk. And the sober one looks like they're trying to take the drunk person home. What do we do?
Witnessed it many times.
Yeah.
I think we all have. If I'm comfortable enough, or if someone's comfortable enough, going over and then physically putting myself in between the two and kind of being a distraction and being like, let's go and dance, and making a friend as such in that situation. You're not directly saying to that more sober person, hey, get out of here, back off. You're just grabbing the other one and being like, hey, come with me, let's go and dance. Sort of the similar situation, removing them from that situation.
And then it probably gives you an opportunity to establish what's going on too, right? Like, someone's at a party, one's relatively sober, one's quite drunk, and the sober person's trying to take them home. Maybe it's asking someone at the party as well. Like, oh, do you know them? Like, do you know that person? They seem pretty charged up. They seem pretty drunk. And if it is a friend of theirs, oh, do you know, is that like someone she's seeing? Is that someone that he's hooking up with or whatnot? And maybe that's the case. Maybe they've been hooking up for weeks, and she's just more, or he's just more drunk than the other person. But definitely finding out, or it's that going up, saying g'day. Maybe they are placid. Maybe they just met this person that night. Maybe then it's that next step of being like, all right, is this the best decision? Or finding out from their friends, is this person going to make it home safe, etc.
Yeah. And of course, by the way, we do have an episode on alcohol and consent, so you can check that out if you want a little bit more of an expanded look at that. But I think what I'm getting out of this is like going back to that people pleaser thing and not wanting to jump in or like be the hero in case you get hit or something, is that so many of these are just go to the person or check in with the person who's being affected, not, you don't have to be the hero and go and hit someone. And we work with some young people in the lead up to this, and there are a lot of great answers on like little turns of phrases you could use, like, oh, my phone's dead, can you come get a drink with me? Or just like pretending to be their friend, like you were saying, Lucy. So little things like that, I think, are really great tools. All right, next scenario, team. Shouldn't have a smile on my face, these are serious. What about if you're in a workplace setting and you see someone who's in a more powerful position than you hitting on someone or making racist or sexist remarks towards them? There's obviously a power imbalance. So how do we navigate that? Curious for everyone's take, but I actually would also be keen to hear your input, Lucy, being, I feel like AFL clubs would have a big hierarchy.
Yeah.
And, someone might be in a position of power to make or break your career, select you or leave you out of the team.
Yeah. Footy clubs definitely have the hierarchy in place. I can't say I've experienced or witnessed a situation like that, but initially the first thing that comes to mind is probably just checking in with that person initially and seeing where they're at with it, if they're uncomfortable or comfortable with it. in terms of making a comment that's just straight up wrong, I think regardless of who it is, I think it just needs to be knocked on the head. And to be honest, that may be a detriment to you and your career climb if it's, they say they're your boss as well. And it comes back to that courage of saying something about it. But it may not be in a public setting. It may be a conversation later on with that boss, manager, person, whoever it is, and just saying, understanding what made them say that comment and how it made you feel being a witness to it, rather than making it about the person that it was said to.
I think with the power imbalance, like I'm thinking about myself, you know, like early career, you know, in a very structured hierarchical arrangement. And yeah, there's things that you see and notice. And for me, it was like, you know, you hope you've got a good manager and a good HR department because they're your first two like places that you're going to go to, and you're going to ask them like, I saw this, I don't know what happened, the context, what was said in response, but like, what are the processes? How do we make, you know, how do we go ahead from here? And like, you'd be seeking their advice because it's not necessarily on you to rectify this and address the corporate cultural challenges. It's like, you've done your bit, and it's not to say like, great, dust your hands, like I've done my bit, but like if you've told your manager and you've told HR and you've said like, I want this noted, this was seen, and like, you know, also checking with that victim, that person who's experienced this, is like using that and saying, hey, like if you want to go to HR, I'll come sit with you, you know, like I'll be with you, I'll support you through this if you want to. Like once you get a sense of like where they're at, how they're feeling, because some people like they don't want to cause trouble, but I think you want to make sure, is it because you're scared of the backlash or like you don't feel supported to say something, not because you're like, oh, I just don't want to report. Like we got to be a bit curious as to why, because there could be so many like power dynamics and cultural things that may make someone be like, yeah, like that's actually my boss. Like they're gonna oversee my next promotion potentially, like, and how that is such an unfair balance of power. So yeah, I think there's some simple next steps, but making sure that person is centered and know that they're actually going to be supported because they're the one who is going to have the, you know, potential biggest backlash.
I think just sort of circling back to one of the key things I'm picking up on is like, you know, going to speak to potentially a different manager or HR separately, it just removes the need to have that like, oh God, I'm not courageous enough to speak up in the moment. So you can do it afterwards, or you can get someone to support you, which is actually just a really great reminder that you don't have to be or have, you know, you don't have to be harsh on yourself if you didn't have the courage to do it in the moment, because that's so hard.
You just want to document like what was said as best as you can remember it and have that as a documented record. And then that's for HR and others to check in and actually get the whole facts of what happened.
And obviously here we're talking a lot about trying to prevent possible sexual harm, but the bystander intervention skills are really useful for a lot of situations. So what about if we are trying to break up that stereotypical fight that we're thinking of in our head between two dudes? What do we do? Have you ever come across those 5 big blokes, Tom, where you've had to jump in and go, that's enough's enough, boys?
It depends on what sort of background you come from, etc. too, when it comes to, you know, even fighting culture. It's a real thing. It's not something you might not see in the cities, but all the time. There is a very like legitimate risk, I think, if it comes to intervening, that you may get into a fight potentially. I think for me, even, and it's probably a terrible situation to be in for starters. If you do have to immediately intervene and you feel in the right position to do so, and you might have to do it and intervene, you absolutely should. You know, I've been in a situation where I've been standing at an apartment in Sydney, at my apartment at the time, looking out into a park and seeing a domestic violence situation going on between a man and a woman. The man started threatening her violently, and then he started threatening others in the park. And there were like kids and, you know, a few mothers with prams, a few elderly people with their dogs. And I'm like scared to do anything. I'm starting putting on my shorts and my belt, you know, thinking like, oh, like I've got the phone in my hand, on the phone to the cops, and I'm putting on my clothes, about to like thinking, holy shit, like I'm gonna have to run out there and do something, you know, like there's these elderly people, there's, yeah, again, parents with kids, and this man's violently threatening his partner and the people in the park. I'm so pleased I didn't have to go out there and do that. This was such an unpredictable moment in time. Yeah. Now, at the end of the day, and I was very scared to go out there. The cops arrived, thank goodness. You know, I do think when those situations approach themselves, call the police immediately. or if you have to intervene immediately, if you're walking on the street and it has to happen, you really have to step in and, there's risk of violence or your safety, tell someone right near you to call the police immediately for you. Someone call the police. There can be really scary moments for sure.
Oh, yeah.
In that particular situation, I think it was the right call to make the phone call to the police. But I also want to acknowledge not every situation the police are required. Sometimes that can also escalate the situation. Maybe some people don't feel safe in the presence of police. So maybe if it was in a school environment, of course it's seeing the teacher. If it was in a public setting, can you go into a cafe or to a store to ask for assistance or help from others? If you're at an event, speaking to security guards or event managers or workers is also a really good option as well.
Yeah. So we're hearing that some people might be in a better position to intervene, and it can be a bit of a buzzword, but how does privilege play into all of this, Dan? And I guess maybe broadly, what does privilege mean?
I think the fact is that we're all related to differently by others around us. So there are some people where if they maybe are assertive, are not seen as bullying, or they're not being seen as rude. I think depending on the color of your skin, your gender, it's going to affect how people relate to you, how seriously they take you. For me, in schools, I know, and sadly it's the case, I don't like this, but it's just the reality, boys will listen to me or respect me more if I put a boundary or get assertive, whereas it might take someone else who doesn't look, talk, or act like me many more instances to get that same respect and buy-in. I think there is a time and a place to intervene. I think where we're all called to go is if we do actually hear somebody screaming, I'm not going to then just pull up my little blankie at night and be not my problem. I think I owe it to at least go and suss out that scenario.
So sort of as we come to the end of this topic, I think it would be important to discuss why is bystander intervention so important. So I guess maybe more than just on, protecting one individual in that moment. What might the impact be if more people intervened as bystanders?
It's so amazing how powerful intervening can be in terms of de-escalation. You can completely stop things from getting worse and worse and worse, potentially. Maybe something that starts as a comment, intervene, it's over. Potentially, if you don't intervene, you let it go further and further and further. It makes that person feel supported as well. I can't imagine that feeling of getting into an altercation or being harassed in broad daylight on the streets, as you would see in a place like a city, and no one says a word, no one says a thing. All these people are walking by too scared to step in. So perhaps if you be that person who does step in, others will also follow as well. They don't have to be if you're the first person to do it, other people will jump in and help. And it's a good thing to think about just how quickly you can de-escalate a situation.
Do you think, Dan, intervening will, obviously, like Tom said, it'll stop it from escalating in that moment, but do you think it'll have an effect on the person down the line? They might not continue on the path or the trajectory they were on to potentially perpetuating more sexual harm in the future?
I think it sends a message to three kinds of people. The victim, that we care. You're not dehumanized. I'm not just seeing this as entertainment or something that I don't give a rip about. It certainly sends a message to the person perpetrating, and it sends message to everybody else there that we ought to do something. You have to care. Courage will follow, and it's contagious, and be the first. Be the first, because you'll find other people will rally to that. And just that's the reality. Is courage is contagious. People just have to go and say something, because then you realize other people are I'm so glad you said something, because that helped me to say something and to just rock up and be there and just be a presence. So I think we all need it to shift that culture that we're not just dehumanizing one another. And I think this is actually so needed, from our friendship groups all the way out to what's happening in our pubs, schools, communities, footy ovals, that people actually care and we want better for one another, and we all get to play a little part in that.
Lucy, what do you think the world looks like, or a night out looks like, or a day at the office looks like if more people stood up? It's
a safer place for everybody. Yeah. And it's almost the more times people intervene, the less likely I think that it will keep happening, because it's going, well, I'm getting nothing other than people just harassing me because I'm trying to cause trouble, kind of thing. So it definitely becomes a safer place. It's a more respectful place.
Just to finish off, and there'll be points that we've already touched on, but just to leave it as a lasting impression, what's one piece of advice you would each give someone who wants to be better at bystander intervention? Might start with you, Tom.
Yeah, if I think if you are worried about yourself stepping in, being that first person to really stand in or say something, at least notify someone else around you. It's just better than not saying anything at all. It's so easy to keep the headphones in and keep walking because you're too scared to jump in and potentially get into an altercation. I think if you can call someone or tell someone in the area, it could be as simple as going into a cafe and just saying, hey, someone's getting harassed out the front. I'm not really too sure how to deal with it. And then there's a group of people in there who can then see if it needs further assistance. So I think even the low level indirect stepping in is a good start regardless.
How about you, Lucy? What would you like to leave people with?
Yeah, doing something is better than nothing. You don't necessarily have to be the hero, as we've touched on throughout the chat. Just do something, even if it's just a little word to the victim, or if it's going into a cafe. Anything is better than nothing.
For me, I'm thinking about perhaps the person who maybe they are someone who's just seen a lot of fight videos, seen a lot of hectic things on social media, content that they feel like they've become a bit desensitized to it. The research does suggest that our mental diet, what we fill our minds with, does play a part in conditioning us and becoming desensitized to the care factor. If you're someone who's I feel like I've become a little bit disconnected to my own humanity and other people's, my gentle nudge and invitation is to think about your mental diet, thinking about the things you're bantering about, your group chats, what kind of content you're sharing. And if it is featuring a lot of degrading, racist, sexually violent or just physically violent content, there is a question mark that could actually be numbing you to your humanity and other people's humanity.
Mental diet, that is such a good one. I've never heard that. When you think about all the things you consume, yeah, that's so good. Oh my gosh. I also want to circle back. Thank you for all your answers, by the way. I personally feel like you can overthink these kind of things. I think how to, what's going to happen if I intervene. You've all made it seem so realistically achievable as well. As been fantastic to listen to. But I just want to circle back to our silly questions. I want to start with yours, Lucy. Do you remember it, and do you feel like it's been answered?
Yeah, so my question initially silly question was about whether you could consent on behalf of somebody else, whether it was a friend that maybe you thought wasn't in the position to do so themselves, and I certainly think to a degree it's been answered.
Yeah, I mean, of course we can't give consent on behalf of another person. And when we look at the new definition we have on consent here in Australia, it's do they genuinely want this? Are they informed? Are they capable because they're not drunk or incapacitated or half asleep? Can they actually make that decision? And of course we can't make that on another person's behalf, but we can definitely advocate for them.
Yeah, and so my question was, when should someone intervene necessarily? After having this yarn, I guess there's all these different levels to intervening. Just something that Dan or Lucy said earlier about hearing maybe a bad comment or an inappropriate comment. That is intervening. By intervening then, right after someone makes a bad comment, whether it's a friend or a stranger, Dan, you going up to the fellas in Fortitude Valley and just saying, not tonight, lads, Luce, or you telling your friend that, that's not funny, no, it's not a funny joke. I guess that is intervening. And yeah, that does answer my question.
My question was about whether or not the silence was enough to send the message to a friend that that's not appropriate. And I've come to the conclusion that that is not enough. And yeah, a combination of all your answers, whether it's just saying quickly, not funny, or if I don't have the courage in the moment, waiting till afterwards with that friend and saying, hey, that's not what we're about. Well, thank you all for your time and thoughts today, because it can be very hard to sort of share personal reflections that might not necessarily paint you in the perfect light. And so thank you all for doing that. And it makes, I think, it a lot easier for everyone listening, myself included, to go, all right, we can be better. Here are some tools. You can acknowledge potentially things you've done wrong in the past and just be better moving forward. So I really appreciate all your time and energy today. And there is plenty more to talk about, and we have a few more episodes to come. And if you want more information about any of this, if we didn't answer any of your questions, teachusconsent.com. But thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. It's a great yarn.